Hello there, lovely folks at YouTube. Ren here. I wanted to talk about the plant that to me really symbolizes the season of Beltane, and that is my rose. Roses are one of our oldest cultivated plants. We have been growing them in gardens, humans I mean, for at least 5,000 years that we know of, primarily in Asia and the Middle East. But yes, we've been growing roses for a very long time. There is, as you can imagine, because of that history, a huge variety of different species and hybrids of those different species, which have varying levels of needs and amount of care that you have to put into them. In general, we divide roses into two different categories. One is the old garden roses, the antique or heirloom roses, and then what we call modern roses. Modern roses are any roses that were cultivated after 1867. It seems like a very arbitrary date, but that is the date of the first hybrid tea rose cultivation in Paris, France. So that's why we've kind of set that date. Anything after that first hybridization is considered to be a modern rose. All roses, regardless of their type and cultivar, generally need about 6 to 8 hours of sun per day for their best performance. Not only does it help them get nice and lush, but it also helps to reduce the amount of fungal diseases they get, because those fungus tend to like, really cooler, shadier areas. They all need well-drained soil with lots of organic matter added to the soil. I know that this isn't necessarily something that everybody can do, but if you do have a garden, I really feel like roses they're less intimidating than you would think. I was very intimidated by roses initially, and now I have a bunch of them and I keep looking to add more, so they get a little addictive. However, if you want roses, it's really important to be really selective. Do your research and make sure that you're choosing a cultivar that will meet your specific needs of what you want, what type of garden you have, and the level of attention that you can give to them, okay? Particularly, it's important to research your roses because there are a lot of roses out there that actually don't have any fragrance. They've been bred for appearance and they don't have any smell. The knockout roses, which is one of the most common rose cultivars, the really pretty looking rose shrubs that you see everybody has in their yards, if you actually smell them, they don't smell like anything. They're bred entirely for looks. Similarly, if you want rose hips, there are certain rose cultivars that don't do very well at setting hips. So that's something you need to do your research if you are going to grow roses. A lot of roses today, particularly the more recent roses, they tend to be bred to be a lot less fussy than the breeds of the early 20th century. I know back in like the 40s, 50s, and 60s, roses were really bred for looks. That's when your long stem roses were bred. Those roses have a lot of attentive needs. More modern roses tend to just kind of do their own thing and they don't require as much attention and pruning and fertilizing and all that. This is one of my roses here that you can see here. This is a very non-fussy rose. This is a Pemberton hybrid musk rose, hybrid musk. It was bred in 1924. This rose is called Penelope. It is a shrub rose. I actually didn't even prune it this spring. I meant to and then just never got around to it. I might have to give it a little bit of pruning because it does have a few branches that have grown a little too long and now they're being weighed down by all the flowers on the ends of them. So once it's done with its first flush of blooming, I will prune this rose. This is a reblooming rose. You can see it's kind of at its peak right now, but it will continually create flowers throughout the year. I have two other roses. This, of course, is a modern rose. One of my other roses is an old world or old garden antique rose, and that is the Rosa Gallica Officinalis. It's also known as the Apothecary rose. So, and that one's been around for a long time. I think it's also, anyway, it's been around for a very long time. That was actually grown by the Greeks and Romans, and as you can imagine by the name, was used in a lot of herbal medicines that use roses. The third rose that I have, I'm not really showing. It's I believe it's a rose called Dr. Huey. It's probably the most commonly grown rose in the United States, although nobody actually plans on growing Dr. Huey. It was used as a rootstock rose for a lot of those really fussy roses that are hard to grow. and the Dr. Huey tends to send up growth that will then subsume whatever roses it was the person was trying to grow. This was grown by the previous occupant of the house. I've tried to remove it several times, and it's very tenacious, so I just let it be now. And it looks pretty at this time of year, even if it looks terrible the rest of the year. So those are my 3 roses. As you can imagine, roses have a very, very long association with love. They are the sacred flower, according to the Greeks and Romans, with Aphrodite for the Greeks and Venus for the Romans, so they do get their love associations from that. The flower buds and petals, of course, can be harvested and dried, used in teas, baths, incense. My personal favorite is to actually take the flower petals, just kind of fill up a jar with flower petals, and then cover them with honey. Let that honey kind of steep and get that rose essence out of them, and then you can just spread it on bread with the flower petals still in it, or you can strain the petals out and add your honey to tea and just give you that rose flavoring to your tea. It's very delicious. The fruit of the rose is called the rose hip, so that's what these little flowers will turn into eventually. That is also edible, very frequently used in jellies and jams. You can also buy dried rose hips and add those to your tea as well, or just harvest your own. If you don't have ready access to roses, an alternative for you as well is there's a product in a lot of ethnic markets called rose water, which is actually one of the sort of byproducts of the production of the rose essential oil, or rose absolute. Rose water is very commonly used in dishes in the Middle East, and it's basically water with that really strong essence of rose to it. And that, of course, is edible, as you can imagine, but also can be added to baths and things of that nature to get that really rose essence in there. I do want to warn you, make sure that you don't ingest any store-bought roses. The long stem roses that we buy, they tend to be very heavily treated with pesticides and fertilizers, and you just don't know what's on them. So those are not safe to ingest. But mine, of course, are, because I know exactly what has been done to them and what's been put on them. So, as you can imagine, magically, this is the #1 plant for love magic of all kinds. Basically, if I were doing any kind of love spell, I would probably have rose involved in it in some way, shape, or form. However, the rose is also very symbolic of spiritual growth. The unfolding of the bud of the rose and revealing those bright golden stamens inside, that symbolizes the revealing of the inner mysteries. So any kind of magical working towards finding your path or sort of revealing those inner mysteries, the rose is actually really good for that as well. And then finally, just roses are really good for protective magic because they do have thorns. This one doesn't have very many thorns, but it does have thorns. And anything with thorns is good for protection. So that's my rose. It is very, oh, look at that, petals. Thank you. Roses very, very quickly become one of my favorite plants in the garden, and I keep trying to find ways to fit in more roses, even though I don't really have spaces for them. So I might get a couple more roses next year. We'll see if I expand my little sunny beds a little bit. I'll probably fit more roses into them. But I do love this plant. It is less work to care for than I originally imagined. So if you have the space for it, I say give it a try. But yeah. That's roses for you. I do love them so much. So I hope this video finds you well, and I will see you again soon.